Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steven. Today we're going to be doing the quarterback and the tight end rankings. I'm going to save filming the running back rankings for tomorrow because I do want to see some of the defenses that are better or worse against those positions, but I feel pretty comfortable with my quarterback and my tight end rankings with where they're set at, so I'm going to go ahead and film this. It is early Tuesday afternoon, late Tuesday morning as I'm recording this, so obviously some information could come out that by the time that you see this on Thursday morning that I just was not aware of when recording this, so just a heads up on that. On the screen are going to be, of course, the rankings, but before we get to that, we will cover for the quarterback rankings right now, and then we'll do the tight ends later. We're going to cover any kind of injury news as well as any kind of interesting usage, which there is none of for the quarterback. So the injury news, why don't we just do that real quick here? J.J. McCarthy might return in Week 7, not Week 6. Kyler Murray, because Minnesota is one of the two teams, them and the Houston Texans, who are on bye this week. Kyler Murray had a foot injury. He played through it. Probably will be fine, but you never know. In Week 6, Carson Wentz had his shoulder injury. I think he played through that, but we'll see if that is something that ends up preventing him from getting on the field. Last week, I do loves and fades with these videos. Let's get that done as well while we're here. So for last week, I loved C.J. Stroud, and I know I heavily tried convincing someone to kind of maybe probably play them against somebody who I had ranked just a little bit higher. I hope that they ended up doing that because he definitely came through, and I faded Jalen Hurts. Now, I want to be clear, I still had him ranked 5th overall in my rankings. It was just, don't expect a big week from him. He doesn't have one of those massive big weeks. He comes through, he's fine, that's why I still had him ranked 5th overall, but I think the fade was effective in just saying, hey, here's a guy, don't expect one of the big weeks from him, so maybe elsewhere on your roster, if you're relying on 25-plus points, a 30-plus point game from Jalen Hurts, don't quite expect that, so somewhere else on your roster, maybe you play someone with a little bit more upside instead of the floor play. Maybe instead of playing Chris Olave, you were to take a chance on, Torrey Horton, something crazy, but you get the idea. That's kind of how loves and fades can work, okay? It's just a suggestion, a nudge, or a warning is oftentimes what they are. So, that before we get into the rankings, a couple of quick announcements. As always, you can find links to these rankings, which when I update them, they get updated where the link brings you to on my website, www.theFFforge.com. Those links can be found down in the description. And, of course, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Like the video. Always very much appreciated. Comments about the rankings. What did you agree with? What did you disagree with? A lot of people ask some start-sit questions in the comments as well. I will take those into account or answer them as I see them. So appreciate all those. They always do help with the the algorithm. And on Thursdays and on Sundays. Thursday, 1 hour prior to kickoff. Sunday mornings, 3 hours prior to kickoff. You can come on the channel. You can see my most recent up-to-date live rankings as well as ask me any of your start-sit questions. We've had a lot of success with those streams, so thank you very much. And Saturday evenings, too. Some weeks I might end up continuing to do that more regularly, but at the very least, if there's an early Sunday morning game overseas, something like that, Saturday evenings, I should be available as well for a quick half-hour session is kind of the goal with those. Let's go on to the quarterback rankings. You've been dying to see these. My first tier is exactly 12 quarterbacks. So play one of these guys and set it, forget it, you're good. My first tier starts off with Josh Allen going up against Atlanta, followed by Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts here at quarterback 3 this week, going up against New York Giants, Jaden Daniels going up against Chicago, Drake May going up against New Orleans, Jordan Love going up against Cincinnati. You love these matchups. Caleb Williams going up against Washington. It's not as good of a matchup, but it's not the worst matchup. It kind of depends. It can go any which way. Baker Mayfield going up against San Francisco. So this is kind of a ceiling call out for Caleb Williams against Baker Mayfield, but if you had these two, Baker Mayfield's probably the slightly safer play. Dak Prescott going up against Carolina. So I believe all of these are maybe not are like below average to poor quarterback matchups so far in the season. Just a heads up on that. But, Dallas, we expect what we expect from Dak Prescott's potentially. Justin Herbert, going to be my love of the week here, going up against Miami, have him ranked at quarterback 10. And I still see Miami as being one of the worst secondaries in the NFL. So kind of just calling out a get-right game for this offense. Now, I did express in the wide receivers video a little bit talking about the concern here is this is strength on weakness in terms of Miami's defense and Los Angeles Chargers offense, and the weakness for this Chargers offense has very clearly impacted how well this offense can be run. And they're also now out with Omarion Hampton's going to be out, so that doesn't help them to just sit there, establish things, slow down the game, make things easier for the quarterback. So Miami's pass rush is its strength on defense. If they can get going against Los Angeles Chargers, that could end up spelling trouble. Hopefully, Chargers have seen this offense struggle and will come in with a game plan of more quick pass kinds of offense, which could help some of the other guys there outside of QJ, possibly in the wide receiver room. Daniel Jones is my QB 11, and Matthew Stafford my QB 12 on the week, going against Baltimore. Really good matchup there for Matt Stafford to continue his little hot streak that we've been seeing in fantasy football. That's going to bring us on to this next tier of quarterbacks. Jared Goff, Bo Nix, Kyler Murray, Mac Jones, Justin Fields, Sam Darnold. Am I too low on Justin Fields? Maybe. But Denver does have good linebackers. I could see them containing Justin Fields quite well. At the same time, maybe not. But overall, I think we're in line for one of the bust type of weeks for Justin Fields. I'm not quite all the way there, given how he's performed for fantasy football in this season, to just outright fade him. But I do have him lower in the rankings here. But you could flip this tier upside down, and I would be fine with those rankings as well. And as you can see, I do feel pretty good if Mac Jones is the quarterback this week going up against Tampa Bay. I don't mind that matchup at all. And yeah, Kyler Murray is probably the one that I'm most concerned about out of this group, and probably for good reason. Should I lower Kyler Murray in the rankings? I know you're all going to probably say yes after last week, but there's more to it than just that, right? That's going to bring us on to this next tier. Bryce Young could have been my love of the week if it wasn't for Justin Herbert, but with Justin Herbert doing as poorly as he has done in recent weeks, I figure Justin Herbert owners might need a reminder to go out there and play him this week because the upside is very high against Miami. Bryce Young going up against Dallas, though. It's been a fantastic matchup for quarterbacks against Dallas. Could be a get-right game for him as well. It's just tough with how he's performed and truly not looked very good to put him any higher, but I wanted to. Trevor Lawrence going up against Seattle. Jackson Dart is my fade of the week here because he's performed very well, as you can see on the season. So I'm sure Jackson Dart owners, depending on who your other quarterback is, might want to be getting him out there. I would caution against that this week, going up against Philadelphia. I think that Philadelphia is going to match up against him very well. So Jackson Dart has been relying on the tight ends very, very heavily through his first 2 weeks as a starter in the NFL. Philadelphia is one of the best defensive against tight ends, so they could definitely limit the effectiveness of that, take that away from him altogether on a lot of downs, which might spell some initial trouble for Jackson Dart. Then you've got Jackson Dart brings rushing upside, of course, which is very important in fantasy football, but once again, those linebackers, that group that they have, they could do a very good job of containing that rushing upside of Jackson Dart. Wouldn't be surprised if they do make him think twice about rushing by the later portion of the game. Of course, in any kind of, could end up getting a big run near the end of the game where they're just driving down. Philadelphia's got the game handled and they're just playing some prevent defense. That's very possible, so maybe I'm not thinking of that enough, but I don't want to necessarily rely on that. And I do think ultimately what we see is the game plan ends up being a lot of short targets to Wan'Dale, so not a very efficient yards game for them. I think Darius Slayton probably gets locked up very much so by Quinyon Mitchell whenever they're trying to thinking of going deep even there. So I just don't like the matchup here. It's going to be almost certainly going to need to be done with his legs on the ground, and I express my concern there. Michael Penix going up against Buffalo this week, my quarterback 22, Tua Tagovailoa going up against Chargers, so it is a tough matchup there. And Geno Smith going up against Tennessee, so maybe a get-right game for him. He's looked pretty poor, which is why he's this low in such a good matchup against Tennessee. And then we just have the rest of them. Of course, CJ Stroud, Carson Wentz are on bye. Oh, yeah, so Carson Wentz, I mean, he's got time to recover from that shoulder injury. If it might even be J.J. McCarthy, of course, by week 7 anyways. So Cam Ward. So Carson Wentz obviously droppable then. Cam Ward, Spencer Rattler, Aaron Rodgers, Cooper Rush, Dylan Gabriel, Jake Brown. Could have put these in any order. I put Cam Ward at the top because it was like the one matchup where I actually kind of liked it. And, maybe they can get something going after some good vibes. Are they good vibes after that victory against Arizona? It was a weird victory. So I put him at the top, but then you can just see is basically cascading based on the implied point total here from Vegas. Assuming Vegas knows best, I just ordered these guys in that order, and I figured that Cleveland and the spread here is actually, isn't that wrong? Pittsburgh are they favored against Cleveland? Maybe they are. Yeah, they probably are. That was the tiebreaker between these two, which is more likely to be like passing throughout the end of the game, and which defense would I rather see? I'd rather go up against New England's than Cleveland's. So let's move on to the tight ends. So here we are with the tight end rankings. Let's cover the injuries and some interesting usage statistics. And if you've made it to this point in the video, please do like it. It really does help. And for the injuries, Brenton Strange had a hip injury on Monday Night Football. Don't know how serious that is or is not, but he was not allowed back in the game. After halftime, he got ruled out for the rest of the game, so probably somewhat serious. And Brock Bowers is considered week to week at this point, so I am not ranking Brock Bowers as of right now. Interesting usage information from this JJ Zachariason information dump that he puts there out on social media every Monday morning. David Njoku was used more this week. Was that game plan dependent? This is my own input, but was that game plan dependent or was that quarterback dependent? Is that a switch up a little bit? Because the week before that, for the first time, we had seen Harold Fannin get more usage than David Njoku. And this week, it really tilts in favor of David Njoku. I think very much possible that is quarterback dependent, but I would not guarantee that. Theo Johnson, with no Malik Neighbors and Jackson Dart in at quarterback, has had a 25% target share and an 18% target share in his first 2 weeks. In those 2 weeks. In the first week's return of Taysom Hill and Foster Moreau to this New Orleans offense, which, by the way, are got players who they're new to this offensive coordinator, and I don't think they were really there this offseason, so it could be a real slow ramp up for them if they ended up impacting Juwan Johnson at all, because Juwan Johnson still had an 85% route rate, which is good. But Foster Moreau's the one that I'd be more concerned about impacting Juwan Johnson as we go. So just keep an eye, make sure his usage doesn't start to creep up, or Juwan Johnson's creep down. Mason Taylor's target share remains high, 26% plus for the second straight week in a row. Great game from Waller. He still is only at a 15% target share for the second week in a row. So target share specifically means when he's on the field, how much is he getting targeted. So despite being targeted less, this number doesn't matter. I mean, despite being on the field less in week 1, that doesn't change anything outside of the fact that just more targets total because he's on the field more. But 15% target share is pretty rough. That's pretty boom or bust. It's not the worst case scenario, but like that's where a lot of tight ends are, a little bit less than that. So don't get too excited about Darren Waller quite yet. I still do like that tight end role in the Miami offense. So Chico Conquo remains at roughly 60% route share this last week, and Oronde Gadsden's route share went up for the third straight week in a row. So I know he didn't do anything in the game, but he does continue to get on the field more, and that's the first step to getting targets. Can't get targets if you're not on the field, which will bring us real quickly to, while we're on that topic, what are you seeing on the screen? So I do log the average targets per game for each tight end. So that's what you're seeing there under the targets column and this fantasy points column. I don't think I talked about this for the quarterbacks, but the fantasy points column, maybe I did. Right? I should have described what the fantasy points, the spread, and the implied point total are for the quarterback. So it's the same thing for the tight ends. Bada bing, bada boom. Let's move on to how did I do last week for my loves and my fades. I loved Cade Otton, who did have his biggest week of the season, so I'm going to call that a victory. And my fade was Hunter Henry, and he did struggle last week. So good job on the tight end. Loved and fade. Let's see if we can't continue that this week. This week, we're going to have a nice, tight little tier at the top for the tight ends, kicking off with Jake Ferguson as my tight end 1 on the week, by Trey McBride and Tyler Warren. If you have Trey McBride, Jake Ferguson, I don't know who to tell you to pick. I ended up going Jake Ferguson ahead of Trey McBride. I'll look at the specific tight end numbers against these defenses, and maybe that's something that would help flip it. If Indianapolis allows a lot of targets, but it's like, low efficiency on them, whereas the same thing, let's say, for Carolina, or for Carolina, it's like the exact opposite. Not a lot of targets, but high efficiency. I would actually then move Trey McBride ahead of Jake Ferguson, especially for full PPR purposes, if the usage has some sort of extreme telltale sign that is showing me for what teams have done against them so far in the season with their tight ends. Tyler Warren's going to be third up on this list going up against Arizona. You could probably argue for him to be second, but I think maybe Arizona's been good against tight end. I don't know. So could shuffle those around. That's going to bring us on to the second tier of tight ends, which goes from my tight end 4, Tucker Kraft, on down to Zach Ertz at tight end 11, followed by, after Tucker Kraft, we got Travis Kelce. I moved him up a couple spots in my rankings before we got to this video. Originally had him a little lower, but it's a good matchup against Detroit. I think the scoring upside is obviously going to be there in that matchup, so I think Travis Kelce for the second week in a row, really good play. Ended up moving him against Sam Laporta. I know Sam Laporta has a big week, but Sam Laporta, fewer targets on the season on average, a little bit less productive in terms of his consistency on a week in and week out basis, and the implied point total, which for tight ends, I care much more about the implied point total than the spread, is also in favor of Travis Kelce, and the matchup is in favor of Travis Kelce. So everything working in favor of Travis Kelce over Sam Laporta this week. Dalton Kincaid, Dallas Goedert, both of them are guys, not the most targets, not that they're way less than other, these other usable tight ends or anything like that. So that's good. But obviously their production so far in the season has been heavily touchdown reliant. But especially in the case of Dalton Kincaid and this Buffalo offense, it's a really good offense that's going to have a lot of scoring opportunities. That's part of why I liked Dalton Kincaid this offseason. So both of them, though, they're in that territory. Darren Waller might be in that territory. We'll see if he doesn't start to get targeted just a little bit more. Going against the Chargers, not the best matchup. Their linebackers, their tight ends can come downhill, crash down quickly against you. And then Hunter Henry, Zach Ertz to finish up this tier. Hunter Henry, of course, has had a good season so far going up against New Orleans, so I could be convinced to go a little bit higher on Hunter Henry here. That might be the play. Let me know what you think. And then Zach Ertz against Chicago, I'm pretty optimistic about Zach Ertz having a rebound week. I know last week was rough, but also you look at the production, the targets compared to everybody else. So he's got to be at the bottom of this tier, but he is in the same tier. Then we've got our next tier of tight ends. Still usable tight end guys, just less confidence in these guys overall by a little ways. Juwan Johnson going up against New England. I mean, probably could have put him up in this tier. Actually, there is a decent argument for him to have a pretty big day with Christian Gonzalez covering Chris Olave probably a lot. That might shovel some more targets towards Juwan Johnson. Look for him to have more targets than he did last week at the very least. I think he's a good play this week. David Njoku here at tight end 13. Once again, I'm believing that he's probably the guy more so that Dillon Gabriel, this offense, will feed the ball to. I do think there is an argument, especially against Pittsburgh, with that pass rush, that maybe they could create a game plan that would be Harold Fannin heavy, so I'm not about to just exclude him. Plus, both of them combined just got a lot of targets, and I do expect that to continue from Dillon Gabriel. So Kyle Pitts, I did end up pushing down just a little bit, even though he's been very good on the season. Buffalo has also been very good against tight ends on the season, so maybe not the best week for Kyle Pitts. So a little bit concerned about that. Jake Tonges going up against Tampa Bay, generally speaking, I think that this offense will be able to move against Tampa Bay, and Jake Tonges could be a big part of that. If we see Ricky Pearsall, Juwan Jennings return this week, especially both of them, okay, now we're talking about completely touchdown reliant. Not that hasn't been a lot of what his production has been, but now we're talking about 2 touchdown reliant. I'll move him down a little bit in the rankings. Mason Taylor, I have right down behind him. He is a love of the week for me, going up against Denver. So, you might think that that's a weird love of the week because Denver is pretty good against tight ends, but Patrick Surtain going to be covering Garrett Wilson. Where else do you go with the ball? Obviously Breece Hall, but Breece Hall, Mason Taylor. That's where you got to go with the ball. So That's just, I think Mason Taylor more of a full PPR play than half PPR, definitely more so than standard scoring. The touchdown upside, you can see by that implied point total, not so high. But I am expecting another high volume game, probably low efficiency, unfortunately, from Mason Taylor. Low touchdown upside, but you hope that it comes through with the touchdown as well, of course, if you're playing him. That's going to bring us on to Harold Fano. We talked about like the potential there, possibly. AJ Barner obviously doesn't get the most targets. He has been getting a little bit more involved in this offense as well, going against Jacksonville. Touchdown upside, I think, is, obviously in play compared to some of these guys that we have surrounding him, and higher than Theo Johnson, who I am worried about. I probably fade the tight end going up against Philadelphia like every week. I respect those linebackers in Philadelphia and the safeties too much for how well they play against tight ends. So Theo Johnson, I am concerned about fading. Philadelphia is great against tight ends. I expect them to take away Jackson Dart's safety valve in Theo Johnson. Yeah, like all the more reason game plan wise that they'll probably put a focus on stuffing Theo. So that brings us on to just a little tier. Still possible you could play Evan Ingram at tight end 20, Jonnu Smith tight end 21. I do see a route to a big, at least tight ends overall combined day for Cleveland, but the most likely one to get the most targets should be Jonnu Smith, although we saw Darnell Washington get the most targets and usage just 2 weeks ago before the bye week for Pittsburgh. But against Cleveland with that pass rush, you want to get the ball out quickly. Tight ends, that's one of the ways that you can do that. So could see Jonnu Smith having a sneaky, 7-target game, and maybe he gets a touchdown on top of that. And then Chig Okonkwo going up against Vegas here, so we'll give that a little bit of faith. You can see the targets are okay for him, and Evan Ingram going against the New York Jets. So these guys, I still like these guys better, generally speaking. If you wanted to play one of these guys over Theo Johnson because you agree with me on Theo Johnson, then go for it. That will bring us on to the, not quite the final tier, so Hail Mary tight end options, Colston Loveland, K-Dot, even in a week where I loved him, it still wasn't fantastic. Noah Fant. I am going to do a second love of the week here for tight ends. This is the same exact story as what I just said about Jonnu Smith. This is like a not desperation, this is like a DFS play kind of thing. You probably don't want to do this. As you can see, like fewer targets than Jonnu Smith on average. Very game plan dependent, but maybe Cincinnati comes out here with a game plan to try to offset this pass rush from the Green Bay Packers by getting the ball out quickly. And I think that that's more of Noah Fant's game than Mike Gesicki's more like a big wide receiver. Noah Fant's more of like a move tight end. So I do like Noah Fant to have a sneaky, possibly good day. 5-6 targets. Mark Andrews right behind that against the Rams. Obviously, if Lamar Jackson were to play this week, I will move Mark Andrews up. But until then, not too optimistic about it. Elijah Arroyo, Oronde Gadsden going to finish this tier out as once very much Hail Mary guys. Pat Freiermuth, Mike Gesicki, Cole Kmet, Isaiah Likely, other guys that I do have in my rankings. Jatavian Sanders, Will Dissly, Tyler Higbee, George Kittle. All guys who have recently been injured. Maybe they could come back this week, maybe not. Brenton Strange injured also right now. Terrence Ferguson, just haven't been ranking him. And Brock Bowers also currently not expecting him to play this week. Dalton Schultz, TJ Hawkinson are on bye. That is it for the quarterbacks, for the tight ends. Thank you so very much for tuning on in. You can check out all my rankings videos are out at this point, despite not having filmed my running backs video yet. I'll do that tomorrow, so that way I can get a little bit more information on some of the tight decisions that I have to make. But wide receivers video came out yesterday morning, so go check that out if you have not yet. Running backs video came out last night. Thank you once again. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Good luck this week in fantasy.